It's time for the Talent Talk Radio Show, brought to you by People G2, a nationwide leader in background checks and employment screening solutions. People G2 gives their clients access to the best human capital management and due diligence tools available. They are dedicated to helping their clients with all of their people-related decisions. To learn more, go to www.peopleg2.com. Talent Talk centers on the topics of talent recruitment and management, leadership development, company culture, and employee engagement. These are all timely topics for CEOs, entrepreneurs, HR professionals, and business leaders. We hope that as you tune in to listen each week, whether to the live broadcast or to the podcast on iTunes or iHeartRadio, that you hear something you can take away that will help you grow and impact your career in a positive way. And now, here's the host of the Talent Talk Radio Show, the founder and CEO of People G2, Chris Dyer.
Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in here to Talent Talk. It's Tuesday, so we are live here with our show. And in an unusual fashion, I have both of my guests in studio. You know, many years ago when we started the show, we kind of had local people in here first. That was the easiest thing to do, and it seemed like I was in here all the time. And then somewhere along the way, I started calling in more often and having more guests from around the country and around the world. And so today's kind of a really cool blast in the past. We've got two guests in studio for once. So looking forward to it. And you know, really this show exists because I love to have conversations with leaders and entrepreneurs and HR professionals where we talk about talent. We talk about how they're managing their talent, and we hopefully learn something about what makes them talented, and maybe learn something and take something way back that we can use in our own lives and our careers, and hopefully make things better in a positive way. There's been so many wonderful stories over the last 5 years that I've been doing this show. In fact, I put a lot of them in my first book called The Power of Company Culture, which is now a bestseller. You can get on Audible, wherever you buy books. If you like to read them, listen to them, whatever it is, it's available on Amazon or wherever you get them. But it has so many of the stories that we've told here and talked about on the radio show, as well as sort of my story and what my company went through, and kind of laid out on, it's kind of a nice little blueprint on what you should be doing to thinking about changing your culture or improving your culture at work. As I mentioned, we are live here every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we love to have you be involved in the show. So if you're listening live, or maybe if you're listening on the podcast, as most of you do, we definitely want to have you involved on Twitter and being a part of our live feed. So no matter when you're listening, if you go back to Twitter at PeopleG2 or look for that hashtag Talent Talk, you can find sort of push out the best comments and the best little tidbits. My producer, Mike, happens to be on the road today, so Tina has stepped in, our associate producer for the day, and she'll be live tweeting all of these great things. So we're looking for her to get that out there. But give us your questions, give us your thoughts, give us your retweets. We'd love to see all of that conversation happening there. And you certainly can ask our guest questions there as well. So catch us on iTunes and subscribe, or iHeartRadio or Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We definitely will keep you posted as we're doing shows here just about every week. All right, we got the business out of the way. Let's figure out who we're talking to today. My first guest in studio is John Hoefer, the president at MILESTONE Risk Management and Insurance Services. And then we'll bring in Janelle Mitchell. She's an executive consultant in HR with HR Squared, and we'll bring her in live again on the studio after that commercial break. But John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. Good to be here.
Why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself, what's important for us to know about you, and of course, tell us more about what your company does.
Sure. So, John Hoefer, I was born and raised here in Southern California.
So I owe a nickel because I screw up people's names all the time. So I've already done that.
Didn't even notice.
Or a $5, because probably everyone screws up your name all the time.
That's true.
Sorry to interrupt, but yeah,
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Right. So born and raised here in Southern California. Went to Servite High School, went back to school in Boston, and to be in finance and go to Wall Street, and graduated in 2001. Mm-hmm. Boston is also the furthest big city away from Southern California, which is why I ended up there. But I came back for the weather and got involved in real estate appraisal, appraising real estate, commercial properties for, let's say, institutional investors, and then got into small commercial loans. And apparently I was chasing bubbles in my first career. Right. And so after 2008, I really started looking at where I was, what I wanted to do. And this is a family insurance brokerage, started by my father. And during this time, I decided I needed a little bit more interaction with live people instead
Right.
of buildings, and a little bit more control over my life and career. And insurance, what I thought was, bringing some valuation experience and getting into the family business, what became a fulfilling career where I really get to affect the lives of people and businesses and their employees, because insurance
Right.
really is a great place and a surprising place to be able to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, so certainly go back to your Servite comment. I went to Troy, so
Okay.
I always had that rivalry with
Yeah, we did.
with Servite. And then you kind of run away to Boston,
Yep.
get away from everyone and everything, and then as many people, Californians do, seem to find their way back. Right?
Absolutely.
You can only deal with so many of those Boston winters before
Mhm.
you realize winter at 65 degrees isn't so bad.
That's not so bad. That's not so bad. And so I've been at Milestone for, 11 years now, as of May. And we are a boutique middle market insurance brokerage focusing on companies between 10 and 150 million in sales. What's great about that size is that their administrative department is usually well run, but at the same time, very understaffed, and can really use the HR, safety resources that we're able to bring. And actually, with your focus here on talent, is actually not only do we improve the talent and work the talent in our organization, but also that is kind of our secret sauce of helping our clients,
Right.
improve their processes, improve their business, improve their knowledge of workers' compensation, of HR, and managing claims.
So as you sort of transitioned from, spending your days around buildings to now helping clients and really having to get into the understanding their business needs and their challenges and the people, I mean, it really is, although certainly I think a lot of the things that you were doing prior have a lot of great applications, it is a different lens, right? It's a different
It is, yeah.
interaction. And so, now you're as the president of the company, what do you sort of find as some of your biggest challenges, especially from a leadership standpoint?
Sure. From a leadership standpoint, it's really the fast pace of technology and how technology is changing, especially, say, on the benefit side, where we had these standalone benefit administration systems that would need to talk to all the payroll, the HRIS, and because the payroll systems were big behemoth companies that couldn't turn very fast, and they had very clunky ben admin systems, and the much more agile standalone systems were great, did exactly what they needed, but there was too much friction between the systems and getting things incorrect. And so now it looks like things are changing back towards the payroll, where they're doing a better job. And so we spend a lot of time learning these systems,
Right.
and then the world changes on you again. And that's the same as that's true for internally. We run our business on a lot of different softwares, deciding what the mix is, right? And there can be a lot of wasted time and capital in understanding the technology mix that the company needs, and then ongoing training, onboarding. Technology is a great force multiplier,
Right.
and it's also a constant change.
Yeah, and there's so much happening. I often, a lot of people will sort of talk about maybe this new software, this new thing, and you sort of ask them what are the core new benefits or something. And a lot of times the things they mention, it's sort of like someone telling me, in California, I bought this car because there's a heat seater, the heater in this. It's like, and the windshield
Why?
wipers will warm up, and I'm like, why? You live in Southern
Sure.
California. Like, I guess as a few days, I've been up in the mountains, and it's nice
Yeah.
when that turns on, right? But like, I don't use.
There's a lot of shiny object syndrome.
A lot of shiny object, and it's like, is that really why you're going to spend X amount more dollars? Is that
Mm-hmm.
really why you're going to upend your entire systems, change everything, retrain
Mm-hmm.
everybody, new user licenses, all for this little thing that.
Especially with client-facing software too, those types of hiccups are not good to pull on your clients. So you got to be very careful about that.
Right. And yet, I think there certainly is a part of the population that they want something. They do want the early adopters and all that. But most people
Sure.
sit in the middle, right? They'll change when it's good enough. When you've gotten
Absolutely.
enough, attrition.
Most people don't want a new login,
Right.
to manage.
Right. I think hackers exist because people just don't want to change their passwords.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's so true.
So I know one of the things that you do with your team and partners is to collaborate with them to kind of problem solve, as we began to talk about, and to handle whatever their different difficult situations might be, or what maybe their growth scenarios or whatever is happening. I mean, especially if you're coming up from 10 million all of a sudden to 100 million, what you need for insurance changes a lot.
Absolutely.
I don't think people realize that. I mean, we've been in some pretty big RFPs before, and it's amazing how no one thinks about, guys, if we double our business here,
our insurance is completely different.
And
Absolutely.
And what does that cost? And they go, oh, I don't know. Well, then how can you possibly even quote this RFP, right?
Absolutely.
So how does that kind of collaboration work for your organization and for your team? Did you guys have a certain approach or way that you do that?
Sure. So we put on a leadership summit every year. I think you might have known about that. And one of the summits we had was at the Ritz-Carlton, using their leadership training institute, actually. And we follow their model of, at every shift change, they have a meeting between the two shifts to transfer the information, right? So now we don't do that every shift change. We do that every Monday, and where all the departments get together, we talk about our clients, talk about what's going on, talk about what's going on in the market. And so this transfers the information around the business, and so we can always collaborate and understand what's going on and what's critical right now for our clients. When it comes to issues, number one, we are very proud of our team approach. It's actually almost very, very few problems are not shared and disseminated and discussed between the team members, because we all have different ways of learning. We all have different ways of approaching issues. We all have a different background. And so we collaborate not only internally but with our client, like you said, on RFPs. That's huge for our contractors, service contractors, is understanding their costs and making sure that they're working at a profit. Then also working with our carriers, since our job is to create an engaging relationship between the carrier and the client, and us as well, and so that the carrier understands what the client is trying to do, and so they can help them grow profitably as well while having the proper coverage.
Yeah, and that can be a real struggle. I mean, it's often people don't think about these types of things. They don't need you until it's too late, right? And then, of course, there's always that old adage that certainly you live in a similar space that I live in, which is sort of a commoditization of the product that we sell. People have this mistake. They think that what their insurance,
it's a commodity,
right? They think their insurance policy is the same as the other one they're going to buy from somebody else, and it's not. There's drastic differences. There's drastic exclusions and things like that. So, getting people to realize the importance of the relationship, and having someone who can develop those needs and figure out what you really should be paying for and not paying for, and protecting you. I've seen people save $500 on an insurance policy and then come back and get sued and find out that they're not covered.
Absolutely. We've seen that as well.
And you say, I would gladly have paid $500 or more to be covered, right?
Yeah, I've seen a local business here with 3 locations that went out of business because they didn't take employment practice coverage.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I had recently an insurance company try to send me a renewal and say, well, we're excluding all class action suits.
Yeah.
And I was like...
And that's probably a wage and hour issue, which is huge in California here.
Right. And it wasn't. It was just a professional liability policy.
Okay.
That they weren't going to cover anything that was a class act. I went, no. I went, what?
You're the biggest threat, the one that will put you out of...
Right.
Defending against several hundred people.
Right. and I haven't even seen a suit, and I don't know how long, that wasn't a class action. They pretty much just turned them all into that.
Absolutely.
And it was like, how, I sort of went back to, my broker and said, this... kidding me? You're basically saying we'll insure you on nothing.
On nothing, yeah, exactly. It's just paper. You give us money paper, we'll give you paper, and it's just super expensive and doesn't provide anything. I don't know why that would even be proposed, but yeah.
I don't know either. I mean, yeah. So, well, kind of getting back to the leadership stand of it, having the type of openness that you talked about with communication with your staff and listening to others, especially your partners and clients and employees. That's really kind of the main, focal point in strengthening an organization. How has your team been able to take that kind of information, that feedback, and use it to their advantage? Sure.
So, well, first, we love to learn from other people's mistakes, but we are human. And so, actually, a good example of this is we have a brewery program, the brewery insurance program. So, big fan of craft beer.
Right.
I certainly enjoy tax-free beer. And so we have a brewery program. It's actually one of the largest in the country. It started because we had a brewery back in 2009-10, and frankly, we didn't know that's right when the extreme growth really started.
Right.
We didn't know all the nuances of coverage, and when I came into that client, noticing these shortfalls we had, and these gaps of information, contacting the right carriers, the best carriers, creating relationships, and then going over the entire policy, understanding all of the gaps, what coverages they need, better understanding of the business, because that's really what happens is we get a very good understanding of the business operations, and when you get involved in one industry, you get a good knowledge of the differences between each of those businesses and how they're each individually going after different revenue streams, even in the same business, and how those need to be protected. So that's how we built an entire program, was frankly seeing our frailties, communicating with partners, communicating with breweries, and really just putting a big package together where, frankly, in the very beginning, when we had 1 or 2 or 3 breweries, we were quite frail.
Yeah, and that's important to kind of, I think, for people to realize is that sometimes we try to go in and we try to know everything, right? We think we have to be at full capacity or near full capacity to begin a project, and really you need to start. And you get in there and you get working, and then you learn and you learn and you get better and better and better. And yeah, you may make mistakes. It may not be exactly how you would have done. I mean, I look at some of the things I did when we started versus now, and it's like, what were we thinking? Yeah. Right. But you just have to start.
Yes, have to start. We started in 2002 with the Milestones Leadership Summit, and that was 50 attendees in 2002. And this last May, about 3 weeks ago, we had Jocko Willink as a speaker with 525 attendees. It's gone from very individuals coming from different companies to a team focus. 4 to 5 people per company come and learn from a speaker all day. So this year was Jocko Willink, the retired Navy SEAL who wrote Extreme Ownership. This next year we have Daniel Pink, who's great in culture and sales as well, right to sell as human. And he is, this is what we do in order to help our clients grow. And there were a lot of lessons learned along the way, going from individuals to teams, figuring out how to keep an engaged audience year after year, and not leaving before it's over, leaving a half-empty room. It's putting on events is actually something we do a good amount of, and that's been a great big learning curve as well.
Well, it sounds like a great event if you have Daniel Pink there. I certainly love all his work and talk a lot about his stuff. And his most recent book, When, has really been important for us. We've really been digesting that in our company and talking about because not everyone wants to, brains are sort of set up to work at the same time, right?
Sure.
And so people often kind of ask, my organization is 100% remote now. And so they kind of don't understand, well, how do you let people work? And actually what we unintentionally did was allow people to work when they wanted to work, which really kind of fit into those time gaps. So some people prefer to work at night. Some people work better in the morning. And so it kind of removes that need that we all have to be here in the office at the exact same time, do the exact same work, right? And so some people that works for, and other people it doesn't work for, and allowed us to kind of hire a lot of different types of people than what we used to get.
You're the second company I've heard doing that recently. I'm very interested in that, because especially with the way real estate prices are going in Orange County, and the collaboration tools that I've been seeing.
Yeah, right. I would say, so we did it back in 2009.
Wow.
And and it's the best thing we've ever done. So we could talk offline about that. Sure. I'll talk your ear off on that one. But
look forward to it.
So if you could put a label on your company culture, what do you think that would be?
Sure. Well, it's our why. It's our our we protect the promises you make. It's a culture of caring for the client, ensuring proper protection, but then also caring for the employees, right? So we protect the promises you make. The business owner makes promises to their family. They're making promises to their employees, and that they have a safe work environment, that they have stable salary and wages, and we are there to protect that. I would say even on the work comp side, which is especially a focus of ours, we have good people who get injured, who are going through a tough system, and it's our job to help them through that system. And then there's also bad players who are working the system and fraudulent claims and basically attacking the business, and we are protecting the business from theirs. It is a a nurturing and a fighting job on both sides, and it is it's just very fulfilling. And I would say all of our employees are engaged in that environment.
Right. So, then if you take that approach and then you look at what you're doing from an engagement standpoint, what does that look like? I mean, because you can set up the framework and say this is who we are as a company and we're going to communicate all these things, but that's
Sure.
that's one part of it. And the second part is, well, what are you doing specifically, for your people there?
Yeah. So, number one, we do a lot of testing so that we really understand each other and ourselves. So we've done the color code tests or other type of personality tests that really understand how we like to communicate, and that's very important to all of us, so that we're all communicating in a way that the other person understands, or understanding how that person communicates to us. And actually, what we're doing right now is we're going through the DISC test, and so we're going through some hiring, and so we're doing it not just individually, but then also as teams, so that as we're really having a growth push here to really understand each other, be able to work together. When it comes to, say, group learning, so in our business, we need to go through continuing education. So when someone goes to a continuing education class, their job is also to come back and teach at least 15 to 30 minutes at a lunch presentation, which not only usually people learn when they teach, and then everyone else is getting the same benefit
and
of
they
that
remember
one
more, right?
And they remember more, right? And then they're getting the benefit of the rest of the business is getting the benefit of their learning. Also, good use of company resources.
Right.
Big fan of that. And then that's also presentation skills. And confidence in front of people, in front of your peers, is also a big benefit of that. We also, for longevity, say at 5 years, our employees get a weekend at a 5-star resort. 10 years, it's a week in Hawaii. 15 years, it's 10 days in Europe. So we have, we actually had someone who started their insurance career with us, and after 2 years, they went to one of the big houses. And after a year and a half, they realized they didn't like working at the big houses. They wanted to come work for a more boutique firm. When she came back to negotiate coming back, she said, well, can I get my time served here so it counts towards this? So it's something that when people, sometimes people make a change.
Right.
But when they come back, that's one of their sticking points. It was actually quite a happy surprise for us here to see that.
Yeah, can I pick up where I left off?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to start my 2 years over.
Yep.
Well, that's really cool. I mean, it sounds like you've got some really good things in there, and you're thinking about this, and you've mentioned some really great authors and people that you have in your leadership event there. I'm going to take a wild guess here and imagine that you probably like to read a few books.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm very because we just had Jocko as the speaker. I'm very immersed in his books right now. I've already read once before Extreme Ownership and his other book, Discipline is Freedom. And I'm now listening to his Dichotomy of Leadership, which goes through, being humble but not passive, or being disciplined but not overly rigid. So it's these dichotomies that exist in, these characteristics we need for leadership, but also not overdoing it or not underdoing it, and understanding the balance, and that's a constant balance here. Leading, a lot of leading is following.
Right.
So often we make that mistake.
Right. Well, we've talked about a lot of great things here today. I really appreciate you being on the show. How can people get a hold of you? How can they find out more if they're interested?
Sure. So our website is milestonepromise.com. And then the best way to follow us, see what's going on, is to connect with me on LinkedIn, John Hoefer at Milestone Risk Management. And LinkedIn is where we do most of our social media.
And for any of you that are name challenged like me, the last name is spelled Hoefer,
yes.
just in case you're typing that into LinkedIn right now and looking to connect. But John, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing so many great insights into leadership and what your company's doing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
All right, we'll be right back after this quick commercial break, and we'll bring in our second guest, Janelle Mitchell.
Imagine buying a newspaper and discovering that the news you're reading is 6 months old. There isn't much that stays the same for 6 months, and the same thing goes for background checks. In a time when so much outdated information is being passed around, it's good to know that People G2 offers something different. At People G2, we provide today's intelligence, not yesterday's news. Our value-added approach offers you a fully FCRA-compliant solution that includes up-to-the-minute information. By combining industry-leading technology with old-school human investigation, People G2 is able to give you information that is accurate right now, delivered quickly through our online system or integrated with your HR system. So ask yourself, are you comfortable working with old news, or are you ready for a different kind of background check company? Visit peopleg2.com or call 800-630-2880. That's 800-630-2880 or peopleg2.com.
When you use the Premier Rewards Gold Card from American Express, the rewards points can keep on multiplying. Buy 3 with triple points on airfare. Buy 2 with double points on gas and groceries. And a single point for pretty much every other dollar you spend on the card. Then, start choosing from over 1 million rewards to redeem all those points. Apply today and the annual fee for the first year is on us. Call 1-800-AXP-GOLD or visit axpgold.com. The annual fee for the card is $175. See terms, conditions, and restrictions at axpgold.com.
Welcome back to the Talent Talk radio show. In case you missed my last guest, don't worry. We'll have the podcast up on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or wherever you find this podcast. You can also go to talenttalkradio.com, and we have all our past shows there listed as well. It's a little easier to kind of navigate and find people. And you can even subscribe there on Podbean to be alerted to excuse me, I am just all over the road there. Wow. To be alerted to new episodes. All right. But I want to go ahead and bring in my next guest, Janelle Mitchell, an executive consultant in HR, in the HR world in different human resources area with her company HR Squared. Don't forget, you can connect with us and keep the conversation going at PeopleG2 on Twitter and use that hashtag Talent Talk. But Janelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We'll get you a little bit closer to that microphone.
Okay.
We want to make sure people hear you. You're in here, so we want to make sure we get all those bits of wisdom from you. But why don't you tell everyone about yourself, what's important for us to know about you, and what are you doing right now with HR Squared?
Sure. So I have been consulting for the last 7 years and recently ventured into a full-time position and then back into consulting, where I feel that I'm much more of a value add in the work that I do. I am a strategic partner, and I assist organizations with creating capacity within their HR business to assist them with increasing engagement, service levels, automating systems. And I think probably the best thing I do is to educate leaders on how to wear that little HR hat and become a part of our world.
I feel like they like to wear the HR, whoopee cushion. They're not, the leaders are sometimes not quite thinking, about things in the right way, as it relates to, doing things the right way, and they sort of want to leave it over there in that office,
Yep.
leave it for that person to think about. And yet they're the ones that are probably breaking the rules and causing all the problems. Anyways.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned, creating capacity. That was sort of the word that stuck out to me there. And that means if companies that are growing, companies that are maybe looking to become more efficient and to save money. I mean, certainly in this time where if you actually find the right person to hire in this market right now, it's really hard. You want to get them in quickly. You want to do that efficiently. You want to do it correctly. So you can actually have them working in your company as opposed to some broken process that might take a month, right, to get them in. Is that sort of what you're seeing right now? Are people focused on the growth, or are they focused on making that process better, or both?
I think there's more of a focus on the growth of the business, especially within the aspect of just generating revenue, sales, really developing the business, as opposed to ensuring that the people piece is stable from a systemic perspective, from a process perspective, ensuring that as you are growing and becoming bigger, that you've got the right systems in place, you've got the right talent in place, that you've got enough HR staff to support the growth of that business. I've done a lot of work with startups and mergers and acquisitions, and I have yet to see an organization really hone in on what are the specific human capital needs before we grow this business, and let's put together a project plan before we embark upon that.
Yeah, and that's really big, because usually I think so many M&As are built around, is this a good fit for us from a profit standpoint, from a, strategic standpoint, and yet the reason that they succeed or fail is always human. And that's never the reason that they ever do the M&A, right? They think we want that product, we want that service, we want that brand, we want that technology, and yet it's the people that make or break. And yet that seems like the last thing that they think about, or sometimes they don't think about it at all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if the systems are disjointed, if the existing legacy employees are not engaged and the company is very agile and the growth is as such where folks feel like, wait a minute, what's going on?
Right.
And they feel like they're not getting that HR service level, then you're going to have a challenge with attrition. Folks are going to feel like, top of the house doesn't care or is disinterested in them as employees versus the growth of the business. Yet these are your grinders. These are the folks that do the work. So it's super important that they are engaged in such a way that they're included in those processes. And I always recommend, going back, to the book, old school SWOT analysis,
right?
Pulse surveys. Let's do a temperature check. Let's think about and get a real data feedback on how people feel before we embark upon this venture, so that we're fully aware of our challenges, our roadblocks, our opportunities, the low-hanging fruit, the high-hanging fruit, and let's build a strategic plan around that.
Well, sometimes you have to be doing that stuff all the time, even if it's small things. You don't have to be doing a giant survey all the time, but if you're going to be doing small things to collect data, you can be sort of alerted to or understand when that temperature has changed, as opposed to waiting for that moment you walk around and realize that your company's under the weather all of a sudden, right? But can you take that survey a little at a time so that you go, oh, I'm seeing something here, right? And let's address this now. As opposed to waiting until it's a big problem. And I see good organizations doing a really good job with that, and I see the other organizations who complain or are really struggling not even be thinking about that stuff. Is that what you kind of see in the clients that you're working with? Is that there's sort of a proactiveness in the ones that are doing well?
Yes, and I always recommend doing a biannual pulse survey. If you do something monthly or even bi-monthly or even quarterly, you don't allow enough opportunity to implement change and to correct some of those nuances in the environment. But absolutely agree with you that a pulse survey should be done more than just once a year or once every several years.
Right.
And exit interviews. That should be a constant, because that's immediate data at your fingertips that you can use for a number of things. You can compile that data and get a really good read on trends, some of the behaviors that are in the environment organizationally, and you can respond to that with training and development programs, with change management initiatives. And so I think it's super important that HR practitioners are on the front line and that they're ensuring that they are positioning themselves to collect that data.
Right. Well, so you sort of said something that I might challenge you on a little bit. We'll see. I do like the approach of, at least twice a year. That's something, right? Or you get into quarterly. But I found in my organization, what we do is we do one question a week.
Mm-hmm.
And so where I wanted to challenge you that's the only way for us that we can enact change quickly and effectively, is to only ask one question, get real deep feedback on that one thing. We really understand what it is that's going on. And then we can very quickly say, yes, this is something we need to address. Here's what we're going to do, and come back in 2 or 3 days to our organization and say, this is what we heard and this is what we're going to do. As opposed to if it's, for me, if it's yearly or twice a year, by the time you digest that much information, because you're going to ask a lot of things and then come up with a plan and then decide what you're going to do. It's now been 2 or 3 months later, and I feel like the organization and the people have changed so much, even in that time, that is your solution too late?
Sure.
And so for us, that's what we sort of did, a little bit of that switch.
Absolutely. And I do totally agree with you. Less is more.
Right.
And I think if you do have that one key question that you can ask to get that data pool, and you do that once a month, I think you can get the feedback that you need from your employees. I'm big on, with performance reviews, to not have more than 3 or 4 questions on the review.
Oh, yeah.
Should be short and sweet.
Yeah. It should not be a long thing. And not only because that gives people better direction and a clearer idea, but you also get better participation by your managers. Because if they had to fill out some 5-page thing, They're not doing it to the last possible moment, and they're going to do the absolute, with the exception of a few very conscientious leaders. I know for me, if it was a 5-page thing, I'm doing it 5 minutes before that person walks in for the interview because I'm busy. I have so much going on. I can't do that much stuff. And it gets left for later. So 3 questions I can do.
Yep.
And I'll do them really well.
Absolutely.
So as a HR pro, what do you think are some of your greatest accomplishments? What are some of the things that you're proud of that you've done?
I think my greatest accomplishment is bringing about awareness to the value of HR and really positioning it as a strategic partnership, not just a tactical function.
Right.
I'm really big on inclusion of line managers participating in HR processes and physically touching the work. I think HR practitioners need to become more partners and administrators as opposed to tactical operators that are doing all of the hand-holding, because it keeps the managers away from the HR business, and then they don't fully ever understand it. They don't understand the why behind it. They don't understand the pitfalls and the risks, the things that we do to help keep the company together and free from exposure. And so I'm huge on managers participating in things like onboarding. That all of that is not just facilitated by the HR team.
Right. I mean, they really should be. They should be the main person who that's their direct employee. They should be ones greeting them at the door, making their first day great, being that support system. I think, but sometimes we either don't prioritize that or we have overloaded that manager so much that they have a really hard time fulfilling that role, and then they maybe just can you just go talk to Sally in HR? They'll take care of you and get your password or whatever whatever you need. And we've lost that opportunity. I think I read a couple of different studies, but one of them was like people within the first so many minutes know if they're going to stick around.
Yep.
This is going to be a job for them, right? And they know by the first day whether they're going to last 2 weeks or they're going to last 2 months or they're going to be out in a year or whatever it is. And that all comes into just those simple interactions and what happened to them. Having all the things they need to do their job from the moment they sit down that very first day, and that they get a work buddy and someone takes them to lunch and does all these simple things that really don't cost any money, is huge. And we spend all that money trying to get that person in the door. And then they may have already decided in the first minute that they're not sticking around.
Yes.
And it's crazy, but it's reality, right?
Yes.
Well, how do you encourage organizations to think maybe more strategically? I mean, HR in the past has been very tactical, and people think about it in a very tactical way. And I've really been happy in the 5 years that I've been talking about this stuff here in Talent Talk. We've seen this massive growth in the change in HR being more and more strategic, and people thinking about it that way because it can be leveraged in so many great ways to help our organizations. But how are you helping them think about it that way, especially when it comes to their people initiatives?
Sure. The numbers speak. And so I'm really big on data, ensuring that the HRS system and any other systems is housing clean data, accurate data, that there's enough data probing. The data will tell you what's going on in the organization. So back to pulse surveys, exit interviews, candor, water cooler conversations, all of that is data. I believe that if we're more focused on what's going on and collecting that data, we will be able to create the people strategies and be able to speak to the challenges in the organization and create resolution. Right.
And that's really big. I mean, if you can understand the data, and you know what you need to measure, you know what's important to measure, you ignore the other stuff that you don't need to be measuring. I think that's another part of good measurement. You can't, we can't be trying to measure everything all the time, right? You can analysis paralysis.
Yes.
But we're really focused on what's important to us and what are our triggers. We know if we're seeing this, we need to do that, or if this for some reason pops up, that's going to spring in another event or some sort of action. But that takes that sort of strategic planning and thought process by leadership in advance, and then for us to say, now let's go here and let's start doing those things. Is that something that you find is a challenge to get organizations to think about and doing, or is that just something that you just sort of have, once you've exposed them to the idea, they're willing to go down that path?
I used to, but I'm finding that it's becoming a lot easier because data is factual. There's no question behind it. So I've worked a lot with multi-state, multi-unit operations. So for example, I had an organization where there was an excessive amount of attrition within a particular region. And all of that data led back to leadership and behavioral practices that were not aligned with the overall organizational goals.
Right. And that can happen a lot, especially if you have organizations that are separated by geography, or they're separated by focus, separated by culture. I mean, there's so many things that can happen in there where you have different sets of leadership, different styles, and then are they aligned and all that. So I've never been wanted to jump into an organization that maybe has 500 locations and everything. I mean, it's really hard to be to set the right message and make sure you're constantly measuring and make sure that everyone is in alignment.
Yes.
I mean, I've seen some great organizations let some superstars go because they were not aligned to what they were doing, and they know they can't control it. They can't control at a micro level. They can only say, this is what we value, this is what's right, and if you're not on board with that, then you got to go.
Yep. And
that's huge and hard.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, I know one of the things that you're known for building, inside this HR this capacities we talked about inside of the human resources component. How do you help companies kind of elevate the service levels across their organization? I mean, you're building capacity in HR, but how does that translate then into sort of changing, what they're able to offer to the end user?
Sure. I think automation has to be a strategy in this day and age. Upping on the technology is a must. I think gone are the days of HR practitioners being stuck behind a desk. And if you're stuck behind a desk constantly pushing paper because you don't have automation, then you have excluded yourself from the ability to be able to participate in face-to-face engagement. Mm-hmm. And that's more important. And so I'm big on self-service, incorporating some sort of comprehensive HRS system into your HR functions and having employees and managers alike engage with those systems so that they are participatory, and then you can be out in the field more. Right. Or around the office more, chatting, talking, getting real-time feedback, and I believe that's where we need to be.
Are there some systems that you're seeing right now that are pretty popular that, it's 2019, so what HR systems are you kind of excited about or seeing, a bit more focus on right now? Sure.
One of my favorites is UltiPro. Mm-hmm. I think it is sophisticated enough for any middle market employer. I think Paychex does well for small employers, but I'm really fascinated by Workday right now, and I think it's because the platform has the financial management component. So it has the accounting features where your accounting team can process and manage all of their invoices through that system. It has the payroll platform. You can process expense reimbursements through that system, in addition to all of your human capital stuff. So it really is a one-stop shop.
Yeah, and you hear all about these different systems in different ways, and Workday, I think, has sort of had this a bumpier road at times, but I have been more recently hearing some really good things about them, which is really interesting. And for us, we integrate into all these different platforms as one little component into their larger ecosystem. So we certainly want them to be successful and want them to be doing well, because we want our clients to be to be happy in their systems. And then they send their background checks to us, and then we're just feeding one little morsel, I guess, of the overall meal that they're trying to digest from an HR perspective.
Yes.
So what are some of the other things that you're seeing, maybe from a strategic level or maybe from an interest level that companies are struggling with right now? I mean, certainly the biggest one we're hearing is finding people, right? The talent pool is dried up and the people are out there, but they got to pay them double to get them to move or whatever it may be. Maybe aside from that challenge, are you seeing other things popping up right now?
For me, it's diversity and inclusion awareness. And, more recently in the last year and a half, we've had 2 very large retailers shut down their business to do a full day of training for diversity, inclusion, and awareness. I think gone are the days of diversity being perceived as a method to avoid legal liability. 75% of consumers are women. And more, the U.S. population is becoming non-Anglo. And so with that, I think diversity has to be positioned to skill set. We're hiring to build a brand. We're hiring to be able to speak to the market and speak to consumers. We're not hiring to avoid legal liability. And I think if there is a focus there, we'll get the diversity that we need from a skill set perspective and not just looking at it as an opportunity to hire for race or sex.
Right. And this is a conversation we've had a few times with some diversity experts on this show. And I'll sort of repeat maybe this little small part of where I think we try to do well here, which is it can be a challenge to walk into an organization that is having a diversity problem, right? I would say most probably fit in that category at some level. I don't know of very many organizations that are like, we're the best, right? Everyone's sort of trying to figure out what to do. But when you walk in and tell people, well, we need to fix this problem, well, first of all, we've called it a problem. Second of all, we show up and we say, well, we need to do some sort of a numbers thing, which sort of feels like a quota, which feels like, and that's immediately puts everyone in sort of this weird energy, right? And then I think at that point you've lost them. Instead of us walking in and saying, guys, yes, diversity is important, but we're going to look at this through the lens of we need to eliminate group thought. We need to eliminate this innate thing that we have in our brains to try to hire people and bring in people who think like us, who look like us, who talk like us, because it's comfortable. Right. And I think that's at the base level. That's what most people are doing when they're screwing it all up, is they're trying. Oh, you went to the school I went to. Oh, OK. And we have a conversation about whatever that school was. Oh, I like you because you had the teachers I had. You went to the place I went, and I'm going to hire you. And it turns out, well, you look just like me. You talk just like me. You think just like me. We're on all the same clubs and we like the same beer. And so you've unintentionally just made the problem worse. And I think if we give people this opportunity to say, oh, and a real mechanism, and I have a mechanism we use in our company, but every company's got to find their mechanism, is how do you get people that are different to be hired? How do you say you need to go out and find someone who's doesn't go to your school and I'm not ever worried about do they look like you or not. I'm saying, do they have a different set of skills? And so we use strengths finders, and we have all of our strengths laid out for our entire company. And I will not hire anyone unless they have in their top 5 a strength that we don't have. That's all we did. And at some point, that's going to get filled up, and we'll have to come up with a new way to do it. But until we get to that point, because as soon as I said that, I didn't say I want more of this race or of this sex or of this thing. I just said I want people who fill our gaps where we don't have any strengths. And magically, who showed up at my interviews?
Absolutely.
Totally different people. Think different, talk different. There were some people I was like, I don't know how you even got the interview. I wouldn't have. I mean, it was so different because their number one strength was something we had nothing of, right? So they were so different than everybody else. But I gave everyone a clear mechanism on how to do it that didn't say, well, I'm looking for this X person and we're gonna hire someone, and that feels off too, right?
Sure.
For me. So if companies can go back and find a mechanism, a way to think about it, how to find people who think differently. I don't know if you agree with me or disagree with me on the approach, but isn't that what we're trying to get to? Is people who have a different way to approach things? A different diversity is about diversity of thought and of opinion and of approach.
Spot on, absolutely. Some of my clients, they have positioned their recruitment teams so that 1, 2, or 3 people, however big the organization is doing the sourcing, and that person will black out the name on the resume before it gets passed along to the hiring manager because the name means nothing. You are vetting for skill set. And then the conversation that takes place at the point of screening, do not go out to LinkedIn to look at the person's profile before you screen them. It is not important to know what that person looks like.
Right.
You're going to have that conversation. It's going to be either a great dialogue or a bad dialogue. You're going to ask behavioral questions, and you're going to get the answers that you need, and you're going to either move them on or not.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of folks out there, as soon as they get that resume, they're looking at the name and they're Googling and they're going on LinkedIn, and they make a poor decision based upon a profile picture.
Right.
Or a name. And
a name, something. Are they good? Are they a good looking person?
Yes.
I mean, just because they're a good looking person doesn't mean they're going to be good at their job.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad. So that's another mechanism, right? There's something in place to help them do that, because I think as human beings, we're not, unless we're being really, really intentional and thinking about it. It is just a cognitive bias to say, this was sort of things that are alike, we can trust. And that was the way we survived, right? This is a blueberry. This one looks like a blueberry. It must be okay. This one doesn't look like a blueberry. It might make me sick, right? So we have this natural inclination. If it's not like what I know, maybe it's dangerous. Maybe it's bad. Maybe it's gonna. And we have to get around that. We're beyond those days.
Yep.
And we have to find new ways, I think, to make those good connections. So.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, tell us, is there a book that you're reading right now that you might share with us?
So I'm a little different. I kind of shy away from books. I'm big on white papers.
Okay.
I'm big on just kind of Googling whatever comes to my mind, whatever challenges I'm facing with my clients and their workforce, and just doing a lot of research. So I'm just very old school in that sense. I want to see, what research has Mercer come up with, Deloitte,
Right.
and I'm really out there reading the data in real time so that I can speak to my clients.
That last Gallup report was like 500 pages long, so that's like a book. It was... Yeah, that's great. Well, we have gotten so many interesting answers when we started asking this question. So this was right up there. So looking for white papers and looking for those instead of those books, you're going to get case studies. You're going to get information that you can go back to your clients with.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Well, how can people get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more about you or having you come in and work with them as a consultant?
Sure. You can email me at mysearch@thepeopleinc.co. So that is .co, not .com.
Right.
Just want to be clear. So it's mysearch@thepeopleinc.co.
Cool. Well, Janelle, thank you so much for being on the show today. And hopefully we have you come back at some point and give us an update on the cool things you're doing.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening today. Hopefully you've gained something you can use in your own career in a positive way. Next week, my two guests will be Bart Valadez, the CEO at U.S. Nursing Corporation, and Fast Staff HR Director at Fairfax County Park Authority. So until then, do what you love and show the world how talented you can be today.
You've been listening to Talent Talk Radio, brought to you by People G2.